Democracy is the most vile form of government. The advancement of science and the diffusion of information is the best element to true liberty. Philosophy is common sense, with big words. The truth is that all men having power ought to be mistrusted. Charity is no part of the legislative duty of the government. Religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind, and unfits it for every noble enterprise, every expanded prospect. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power knowledge gives. Equal laws protecting equal rights. The best guarantee of loyalty and love of country. All men having power ought to be distrusted to a certain degree. The means of defense against foreign danger historically have become the instruments of tyranny at home. As a man is said to have a right to his property, he may be equally said to have a property in his rights. If tyranny and oppression come to this land, it will be in the guise of fighting a foreign enemy. Liberty may be in danger by the abuses of liberty, as well as by the abuses of power. Let me recommend the best medicine in the world: a long journey at a mild season, through a pleasant country in easy stages. Liberty is to faction what air is to fire. Had every Athenian citizen been a Socrates, every Athenian assembly would still have been a mob. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance. Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded, because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. If we are to be one nation in any respect, it clearly ought to be in respect to other nations. Experience is the oracle of truth, and where its responses are unequivocal, they ought to be conclusive and sacred. Religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind and unfits it for every noble enterprise, every expanded prospect. The Senate ought to be so constituted as to protect the minority of the opulent against the majority. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. In no instance have the churches been guardians of the liberties of the people. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. The circulation of confidence is better than the circulation of money. Experience is the oracle of truth. But what is government itself but the greatest of all reflection on human nature? The censorial power is in the people over the government, and not in the government over the people. We should never think of separation, except for repeated and enormous violations. The presidency alone unites the conjectures of the public. It is a principle incorporated into the settled policy of America, that as peace is better than war, war is better than tribute. The best way to avoid danger is to be in a capacity to withstand it. The advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only guardian of true liberty. Each generation should be made to bear the burden of its own wars, instead of carrying them on at the expense of other generations. The executive has no right, in any case, to decide the question whether there is or is not cause for declaring war. In republics, the great danger is that the majority may not sufficiently respect the rights of the minority. Oppressors can tyrannize only when they achieve a standing army, an enslaved press, and a disarmed populace.